If we have to define the soul of leadership, we often look at influence versus dominance. And especially in the United States, we have a catastrophic habit of conflating between leadership with dominance. We look at the loudest person in the room, the one with the most aggressive posture, sharpest elbows, or the highest net worth. And then what we do is we slap a leader label on them. But from a psychological and ethical perspective, that isn't leadership. That's just a status-seeking individual. True leadership is a social contract, the initiative to serve. It is the psychological capacity to maintain the safety and focus of a group while navigating a crisis or to comply with a goal or an objective. It is stewardship, not ownership. In the US, we shifted toward a strongman, the hero archetype, forgetting that a leader's primary job is to be the scaffolding that allows others to build, grow, and perhaps be better than their own leader, so they can guide others towards their own prosperity and achieve goals, personal and professional. What we see today is leaders wanting to be the monument on top of the hill, serving only themselves. And that's the problem when we define leadership as having the final say, almost like a dictatorship. We create a culture of complete silence. Psychologically, leadership requires a high level of self-actualization, because if you haven't mastered your own insecurity, your fear, your bad habits, your lack of trust, and especially the fear of complying with so many personal and professional goals, your leadership will always be a defensive mechanism, and you will use it against your own people. And we see this a lot in the US today. Leaders who use their power to silence dissent too, because they are too fragile, to handle being questioned. And when you can't ask a question to your own leader, you become immediately labeled as insubordinate. Remember, these individuals are not leading. Don't mistake what they're doing. They are managing their own anxiety to control others, which makes them feel empowered. This is why many leaders surround themselves with yes men. Have you noticed? They create their own social groups because they cannot handle the emotions of being questioned, of being challenged in a different direction. They're afraid to grow outside of their safe environment. The yes men, they're just not only a team for them or for these leaders. What they see is almost like looking at a mirror, and they're happy to see that reflection of no competition and how they can dominate that yes group at their will. Because what the yes men is also looking for is to benefit for their loyalty. Just so we can have a better understanding, nearly 50 to 70% of people in leadership positions are perceived as failures by their subordinates. And you will ask yourself why? And this is due to a lack of interpersonal skill and ethical consistency. Remember, you're being judged not only by those on the top, but those that work for you as well. They can see through you. They can see how you behave every day, how you make your business decisions, and is it benefiting everyone? And I want to give you guys an example of leadership. In 1915, Ernest Shackleton's ship, the Endurance, was crushed by Antarctic ice. His original mission was to cross the continent, but it became a complete total failure due to the winter. A manager or a numbers-driven boss would have looked at the sunk costs and the lack of deliverable and perhaps would have folded. But Shackleton understood the psychology of resilience. He personally gave his own mitten to a subordinate and slept on the hard ground so his men could have the better sleeping bag. He understood that a leader's primary job is the stewardship of hope, is being among with them during times of struggle and becoming one with the team as you lead. His primary job was to keep everyone safe, because the ship can always be rebuilt, but can someone recover from death? That's not possible. He understood that his job was to bring every single man in that boat home. And in order to do that, he had to trade his personal and professional comfort for the collective survival of the group. He didn't do it to be called a hero. He did it because he understood right from wrong and the value of human capital. Remember, leadership is all about the initiative to serve. That's always the first step. And he served his people and he brought him back alive. Now, let's think a little bit. Is leadership something you're born with? Or can you actually learn how to be a hero? What do I think? Well, some of us have a temperament for resilience. Leadership is a moral muscle. You aren't born with the ethics to choose right over profitable. That is a daily learned choice. You learn to be a leader through the constant painful correction of your own ego. How do you test yourself? How do you lower down your defensive mechanism so you can reason and look at the bigger picture, because a prophet cannot exist without your people. And if your people was to be removed, all that stands is you as a leader. And you as a leader are very vulnerable without a team. So if you lost your title, your salary, your position, and your corner office tomorrow, would anyone still follow you into the cold? I hope somebody does. And I hope it's not your yes man. Comment. You're loving the Ethics Guild podcast? Don't want to miss any new episodes? Want to be part of our panel and be our guest? Subscribe, leave us a comment, be part of the community of the Ethics Guild podcast. We need more people we need people that are brave to speak up for what's right, to stand for justice and dignity. Become one of us. Be part of the Ethics Guild podcast community, and let's journal to endless possibility where we all become winners. Don't forget, subscribe. This question leads me to the Ivy League paradox and the missing class of adequate professional adequate. We gotta ask ourselves, do we really form leaders in the US? Honestly, we mostly manufacture high-level administrators. Our elite educational pipeline was built on the Prussian industrial model over 100 years ago, designed to create compliant workers who respect hierarchy and hit deadlines without asking why. This is exacerbated at the Ivy League level, where leadership is taught as a series of case studies and spreadsheets rather than a study of human character and talent. These institutions have become gatekeepers of prestige rather than incubators of integrity. What I'm trying to say here is that the way they study leadership is that human capital equals a number. And if that number doesn't provide profits, stays away from the red, numbers can always be replaced and correct. The Ivy League paradox lies in the fact that these schools teach you how to be an expert on that, but now how to be a human, how to understand people's personal experiences, emotions, motivations, inspirations, creativity, personal goals. What students are taught is they are the best by virtue of their admission letter, which often fosters fragile narcissism. They enter the workforce with a chip on their shoulders, believing their pedigree makes them immune to moral error. And this is why they create this defensive mechanism that they can't be correct unless it's somebody above. While Ivy League graduates represents less than 1% of the US population, they hold roughly 41% of leadership positions in major corporate and political settings. This concentration of power creates a credential shield, forming elitism, where elite graduates only trust others from the same circles. Remember, we are tribal beings. This is how the elite forms their tribe, and this leads to a case system that excludes the lived experience of the majority. Just 1%, 41% in high position. I want you to reflect on those numbers. This also creates the professional etiquette gap, because it feels like there's a missing class, especially in leadership, on how one human being should treat another. We forget how to treat people with dignity, with that dignity engagement that everyone deserves. Think about this. We teach people how to use Excel, PowerPoint, and how to model like a 10-year growth, short and long-term goals. But we don't teach how to tell an employee no without shattering their sense of belonging. Think about this. When we cannot learn how to be polite and dignified when somebody has made a mistake, when we have to refuse a proposal, what we do is make people feel like their idea should be undermined because of the position they come from. This happens often in places of work, and it's sad because it's demoralizing. This motivates employees to want to contribute more. And if it's hard for you to say no, polite, with respect, imagine how hard it is for you or for any leader to apologize. And the reason being is because in most elite businesses, an apology has become a legal liability, accepting that the company did wrong rather than a psychological necessity to make us feel human and valued. I'll give you a good example of that. Let's go back to the 1960s. The best and the brightest, a turn of the Ivy League educated cabinet of JFK and LBJ, used data-driven logic to justify the escalation of the Vietnam War. Think about it. They had the highest credentials on earth, but yet they lack their moral imagination to see the human catastrophe they were creating. Thousands died in this war, drafted against their will, because they prioritize metrics over mercy, their own personal agenda versus people's choice. I want you to think about this. Is an Ivy League degree a sign of wisdom or simply a receipt for social compliance? I want to expose also a big point about the leading people lie that we hear very often. It's always the deadlines over dignity. Let's look at the modern job description for a leader today. It's a laundry list of KPIs, right? All they ask about, how did you perform? What was your behavior when you achieved this result? What was the behavior reaching out to other departments to reach your KPIs? And it's all about metrics, although the questions are related onto how you relate and communicate and lead your people towards your KPI. And it's designed to hear some inspiring stories, but at the end, it's all about the KPIs. It's all about the metrics, because that's all that matters. It's all about the deliverable and optimization. It's never about how do you make someone feel about their day, every day at work. And this is where the lack of emotional intelligence, EQ, becomes fatal. We have replaced the concept of mentorship with task management or an SOP training. And in doing so, we have dehumanized the workplace. Think about it. You're taught maybe once or twice, and then you're given a book to understand all the standard operation procedures, and then you have to figure it out. And they give you a 30, 60, 90 period of time to see how you adapt, and the responsibility falls back on you. And think about this too. How often does your leader train you personally, at least an hour or two every day, for you to be successful at what you do? And again, this is where the debate comes. The leader has so much on their shoulders that they have very little time to do this. So they will assign someone not at the level of the leader to do the job of a leader. So what are we mentoring in the workplace to start? Because again, if you work in a department and you're the leader, wouldn't you want your team to have and understand your philosophy, how the team is structured by your guidance? And what are the responsibilities versus expectations that each person should have in their position and when they're not in their position to become a whole team? This gives me the idea that when creativity is stifled by a rigid 40-hour task cycle, leadership dies. You become a manager at most, and in most cases just supervising. Because be honest, how many times have you seen your leader, manager, come work with you shoulder to shoulder? Maybe out of 10 leaders, one. All they do is direct and supervise. This environment promotes the Dark Triad of personality traits. And you see this: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. In corporate America, these traits are often mistaken with strength or efficiency. A narcissist's grandiosity is mistaken for vision. A Machiavellian manipulation is mistaken for strategy. A psychopath's lack of empathy is mistaken for making the tough call. We have provided an excuse for each one of these psychological traits and behavior. This leads to 23% of employees under toxic management and pressures to become actively disengaged, literally working against the company's interest because they feel like gears in the machine. Talent Smart shows us where their statistics that people with low EQ earn $20,000 less a year and are 4 times more likely to have their teams quit. I'm going to give you an example of this. I want you to go back to 1970, the Ford Pinto scandal. It is an example of numbers over people. Ford's leader knew that the gas tank, or the car's fuel tank, was a fire hazard. They conducted a cost-benefit analysis that concluded it was cheaper to pay for wrongful death lawsuit than to recall and fix the car. They practiced morally coping, separating their business logic from their human conscience. This is the ultimate pushing numbers lie. When numbers become more important than people's lives, and you just become a statistic. And we probably ask ourselves, why didn't our college taught us how to handle and manage and lead people? And the answer is simple: because colleges, they grade your individual performance achievements, whereas leadership is about collective success. Our current system is designed to produce high performance soloists, not conductors who can bring a whole orchestra together. I'll leave you with this question: if your leadership is just hitting numbers at the cost of your team's mental health, are you really a leader or just an expensive calculator?